We have breaking news out of the Russia-Ukraine war. Russian forces have, for the first time in a long time, opened a new front in the northern part of the country around the city of Kharkiv. Russian forces have, as this tweet has shown here, have launched an armored ground attack and has already gone at least a kilometer into the country near the town of Volochansk. Sorry for that, Volochansk in the northern part there. This is the long-awaited offensive action we've been talking about for a long time. Now it appears that it has finally launched in there. And in fact, we actually had President Zelensky just a couple of hours ago address it before his public.
Росія почала нову хвилю контрнаступальних дій на цьому напрямку. Україна зустріла їх там нашими військами, бригадами і артилерією. Важливо, що вони можуть збільшувати і підтягувати ще сили в цьому напрямку. Це факт. Але наші військове командування знали про це і розраховували свої сили для того, щоб зустріти вогнем ворога. Зараз йде жорстокий бій в цьому напрямку. Артилерійським вогнем, з того, що мені відомо нам сьому ранку, десь восьма ранку, ми зустріли вогнем.
Sorry, the audio wasn't that great on that clip. That's the only thing we had there. But really, it was more important that you see him, because body language is a huge issue. And if you know anything at all about Zelensky, many of the clips that we've shown in the past, and another one that's going to come up later in this show, you see a very confident man who's, speaking very emphatically. And man, none of that was on display against Digger. So that kind of tells you how this is really concerning to him, because this shows that he now has another front to worry about. And he's already continuing to suffer loss after loss in the eastern part of the front, in the central part of the eastern zone, which we're also going to talk about here shortly. But this is a very worrying situation for the Ukrainian side, because now there's just another front that they have to deal with at the same time they've been trying to put out the fires in the east. And just let me explain to you why that's a bigger issue than may appear, because Ukraine has very limited reserves already. Manpower is their number one problem, much more important than even the lack of artillery ammunition. It's the lack of manpower. And now then all of a sudden they're going to have to possibly move reserves from one part of the front to another, but they don't have enough really to do that with. So if they take it out of one area and Russia is putting pressure in two separate areas, you can't pay Peter to rob Paul, or rob Peter to pay Paul in this situation, because you just don't have it. And if you pull it out of one area, then that's going to make the Russian pressure all the more effective. And I think that's why you saw the real concern on Zelensky's face. So first of all, let me just kind of bring you up to date about what actually has happened this morning, and then we'll take it from there. Here's Weeb Union talking about where on the front the action has taken place.
It is so far reported that multiple axes of the front line near the Ukrainian and Russian border in the Kharkiv region, the Russians have started their offensive operations. It is reported that the villages here near the front line to the northeast of the city of Kharkiv and in the northeastern parts even further away, heavy explosions are taking place all across the frontline villages, and the Russian army are preparing to enter the battle, of which the first reports of actual Russian soldiers crossing the border and attacking villages.
Now, it matters a lot about how many troops we're talking about here, because just breaking through the border is one thing, but it really depends on how big the force is, about how big the risk and the threat is to the Ukrainian forces. Here is Military Summary Channel of DEMA, Military Summary Channel, talking about the forces that intelligence reports tell us is actually in the area of this front.
Ukrainians, let's say, classified the Russian group of forces in three groups. There is going to be group of forces Bryansk, group of forces Kursk, and group of forces Belgorod. As you can see, every single group has the title of the region where this or that, let's say, unit will be deployed. The Ukrainians are saying that there are going to be around 50,000 soldiers, and let's say from on Bryansk direction there are going to be 8.5 thousand soldiers. On Kursk direction there are going to be 10.8 thousand soldiers, and on Belgorod Belgorod direction, and the direction in front of Kharkiv, there are going to be 31.2 thousand soldiers. Also, the Russians have already concentrated up to 400 tanks, 130 armored vehicles, 990 artillery systems, including the 120 multiple launch rocket systems.
Now that's a fair amount of firepower. You're talking 400 tanks, 900 artillery systems, and as we know, artillery is along with the FAB bombs are really the biggest casualty producers on the battlefield. So that's not an insignificant amount of force. But when you're talking about a total over three separate sections of that front of only 50,000 troops, that's not that many. And when you're talking about the city of Kharkiv as a major city, which would probably take hundreds of thousands, if not more, of troops to really attack. Probably the better part of 200,000 if you're going to take the city of Kharkiv. So that's probably not the objective, but we do have some information of what the objective is. Back in March, on March 19th, Vladimir Putin actually went on and told people what his objective was going to be. Check this out.
We will be forced at some point, when we deem it appropriate, to create a certain sanitary zone in the current territories under Kyiv's regime's control, to create a security zone that will be quite difficult to cross with the means of destruction that the enemy is using, primarily, of course, of foreign manufacture.
So just to give you a little background of what he's talking about there and what is the reason for Russia to want to have a buffer on the northern zone. Again, yesterday, Ukrainian forces attacked a missile or artillery barrage into the Russian city of Belgorod, which is in the southern part of Russia, just north of the border. And that's something that Ukraine's been doing for a while. They have launched some special forces raids up in the area. It's a big nuisance. Oh yeah, that's great, Gary. I didn't realize you had that video. That's awesome. These are some of the things that the Ukraine side has been doing in Russia proper. Now, these things don't have any military significance. Most of the places, in fact, what you're seeing there, those are homes that have been hit. And that was the case overnight yesterday with Belgorod as well. Most of these are just into civilian areas, I think primarily to annoy the Russians or to show, hey, we're suffering, so are you going to suffer? But that has reactions. And now that it appears, and Putin has been talking about this for a while, that he's going to respond to this by creating between a 10 and 20 kilometer buffer zone in Ukraine. So he's going to launch a new operation to push the Ukraine forces back so that their artillery pieces are not in range of the Russian cities. That's his objective right now. And let me actually show you a map here that can kind of help point this out a little bit more. If you'll bear with me just a second here. So this is kind of give you an idea. This is from the Institute for the Study of War. This is the overall map here. And you see these are all the areas where the ongoing offensive has been happening, especially in this center area here, which we'll talk in some more detail momentarily. But this area up here, so here's Kharkiv, and here's the area where these three new Northern Army is starting to come in for it. So it looks like that he wants to push back the Ukraine side here. Let me zoom in a little bit there. So this is Kharkiv and Sumy. This is where the first grouping is, the second grouping here, and then the third grouping here. So he's basically going to extend what has been a 600-mile front up to, I'm not sure what the distance is, but it's going to be pretty much a significant expansion of the front line. And they've already broken through the border in one place here up to a kilometer in the Kharkiv area. So Russia wants to push it back closer to Kharkiv. Now, there's also been lots of talk for a while now that that's actually something that that Russia does have in their target is to actually take the city of Kharkiv. And I think when you're combined with the pressure here and in the pressure in the center part of the zone here that could possibly break through, then it's conceivable that Russia's plan is to actually push back here and hold while trying to make a penetration in the south that could then attack from the up the Ukraine in the Kharkiv area from two sides, both the north and the south. And it's unclear whether Ukraine would be able to knock that out, whether they would be able to handle that from two fronts. So I don't think that they would. And that's the reason why I've been saying in recent episodes, I think the chances are pretty high that the Ukraine army will break in between now and even the end of the summer. And I think that view is on Zelensky's mind. I think that's why you saw him reacting the way he did to that news, because it's been theoretical up to this point. Now it's real. But really, the one of the bigger questions is, and this is what so many American officials and NATO officials have been saying, that okay, this $61 billion package, that's going to make the difference. And now that it's been appropriated, movement was started almost immediately, and they're starting to get some more shells into the area. But the question is, will that really be enough? Is that going to make a difference on the battlefield? And there was a question for the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Brown, recently, where they were asking him, after this package has been passed, is this going to make a difference in it? Now, as he answers this question, notice the specific question the reporter asked, and notice what he doesn't say.
When do you think that Ukrainians will have the opportunity to again have the upper hand?
Can't necessarily predict a timeline of where, for the future of where the Ukrainians will have an upper hand, but we can shape the future. I think there's some near-term effect because now the Ukrainians don't necessarily have to ration what they have because they know things are coming out of this package, and there will be follow-on packages because of the supplemental.
She didn't ask if there's going to be follow-on packages. She asked, when will they be able to gain the upper hand? Now, I'm going to talk about this in some depth later part of this episode here, but that is really a crucial question. So I'm glad she asked that, because you've got to be able to show how all of these things that are coming are going to be able to offset the Russian advantages in a number of categories. But so far, he didn't even address that question. Just talked about, well, I can't predict the future anyway, talking about more packages here. That's not answering the question. But what we're also seeing simultaneous to this is, I think, already the creation of a myth that's going to say, oh, well, Ukraine could have won if we'd only gotten this weapons faster, if they'd have come in further. That's the reason for the loss. And here's an analyst on CNN talking about that very thing.
There are still consequences from the months-long delay in U.S. aid, and that Russia sees an opportunity here as Ukraine awaits that aid, that ammunition, weapon systems, etc., to arrive in quantities. They see an opportunity here to step up, in particular, air attacks, missile attacks, drone attacks, to exploit that delay. And we saw a sample of that on Wednesday overnight as Russia sent dozens of drones and missiles specifically targeting energy infrastructure, which has been a favorite target of theirs. They want to take advantage of that before Ukraine can, in effect, arm itself up again to defend itself. And it's also a reminder, Frederica, that during this delay, Ukraine lost ground. It lost territory, and it lost a lot of soldiers. And I've spoken to Ukrainian commanders who blame those losses, including those losses of soldiers, on that delay.
So the Ukrainian leaders have blamed their losses on the lack of weapons, specifically from the United States. Okay, let's check this out. Let's examine this, because that's important. You're going to be hearing more about this. I've already heard it on other channels and other news media saying kind of the same kind of thing. Jens Stoltenberg, I remember, actually, after this was passed, made the same kind of claim, so that somebody else to blame besides themselves. That's what's going on here. Let me make sure you're aware exactly why they're saying these kinds of things. So it's not that they have a bad plan. It's not that the overall balance of power, as I've been saying for years, is decisively on Russia's favor. No, it's because you didn't give us this stuff fast enough. Okay, first of all, there's this enormous, massive amount of things that the United States has given. Extraordinary number of vehicles, over 5,000 military vehicles, all different types, millions of artillery shells, thousands of missiles of various types, hundreds of millions of arms and ammunition. So you want to now claim that because there was a delay of 6 months in the next package, and that's the reason for your loss? No, it's not. There are very many, very practical, fundamental reasons why. And frankly, a lot of it is because of the Ukrainian leadership and the decisions that they have made at multiple points in this war. So don't believe it when they try to tell you it's just because we didn't get the money out. Now, let's also look at one other thing here. And let's take a look. Oops, sorry, got the wrong thing here. Let's take a look at what this package is going to include here, because one of the things that you do keep hearing about is that all this stuff that we've given them in this new aid package. Well, let me show you. This is the official administration announcement that you're seeing on the screen right here. And then scroll down here. The capabilities in this announcement include these various things. Is AIM Sidewinder missiles, additional ammunition for HIMARS, 155 millimeter rounds, etc. You know what's not on this list? Do you recognize anything here? There's no quantities. They don't tell you how many of any of these things that they've given to you. And I think that there's a good reason for that, because they know that if they put the number of 155 millimeter shells, it's going to be self-evident. That's not going to tip the balance. That's not even going to redress the imbalance that's in there, because there's many places on the front, which again, I'm going to touch on just a second again, are here where some of the leaders on the front are claiming that they have 1 to 10 disadvantage in artillery shells. And the small number that's coming from here is not going to change that. And look, we know that because we've seen the math. It's been out there already. People are talking about it. J.D. Vance, Senator Vance, talked about that there's a math problem, that the capacity of the United States, forget about how much money is passed, we can't make enough shells in the quantities they need anytime soon. It's going to be years before we'll be able to produce even a third of what they say their daily needs are now. So if this had been passed on day one in September of last year, it's not going to change. Maybe the difference instead of 1 to 10 might have been 3 to 10, maybe, or maybe 2 to 10. It wouldn't have been a big difference because there just aren't that many shells. So they're looking for a place to put the blame. But folks, the blame is not in how little money you have provided or was taken from you actually by the U.S. Congress and given to Ukraine. It's not that. It's the very practical, fundamental reasons that can be counted. This is not kind of this ethereal, theoretical stuff that's hard to get. It's easy to get if you know what you're looking for. And I'm not clear whether these people don't know what they're looking for, or they're just somehow blinded themselves, that they're going to try to look for something else that doesn't exist in the hope that some miracle can come out of nowhere. It's unclear on that. But Zelensky himself also seems to be playing into this same unwillingness to look at the reality, because here he was talking about one of the other cities in the east called Chasiv Yar that Russia's been trying to get for a while. And Ukraine has actually succeeded in slowing down that offensive, but it's part of a larger issue. Here's how Zelensky views that battle.
By May 9th, Russia expects that in the east of Ukraine, they will take Chasiv Yar city. I visited the region recently. I talked to the soldiers. The soldiers say that they lack equipment. They need to fight Russian reconnaissance drones, which essentially guide the artillery. And we need artillery shells. I hope we'll be able to stay, and the weapons will come on time, and we will repel the enemy, and then we'll break the plans of the Russian Federation with regards to this full-scale offensive.
So he's just saying, on the one hand, we got some trouble here. There's some difficulties. Russia's been moving in. And of course, now then that today that they've added yet another front to that. But it's not, he's still oblivious to all this and says, but we'll break Russia and then we'll go on the offensive. But what he doesn't tell you is any plan, any rational path to how. I mean, aside from braggadocious statements and positive aspirations, he doesn't ever lay out how. Now, a good bit of that I blame on him, because he should know. He knows his forces inside and out. He gets all the probably hourly briefs if he wanted them that much. He knows what the forces are. He knows how much he has. He knows what they don't have. He knows what it would take, or should know what it would take. But I can't put all the blame on him, because senior American officials are feeding this insanity here. And here's a report that's talking about something that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said. I just almost have no words, but I'll give you some anyway on the other side of this. Check this out.
Ukraine will look to launch a counter-offensive in 2025 with the support of the approved $61 billion aid package from the United States, as well as additional Western aid funding, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told the Financial Times. He noted that he still expects Russian progress in the near term on the battlefield, despite a new U.S. funding package approved in April, because you can't flip the switch right now. Speaking at the Financial Times in Washington, Sullivan noted that with incoming U.S. weapons supplies, Ukraine will have the capacity to hold the line during the year 2024 and guarantee that Ukraine will be able to withstand the Russian attack.
That is just fantasy. To be able to talk about an offensive in 2025, to say that I don't know if he used the word guarantee or if it was a reporter there, but to even imply that, yes, this aid package is going to help them stop the Russian advance and then allow them in 2025 to go forward. There's no basis for that. There's no evidence at all that there's any capacity to do that. And truly, when you look at the manpower numbers, that's really the biggest issue here. And is because if you don't have enough troops, it almost doesn't matter how many ammunition and weapons you have, because you don't have enough people that can use them. You don't have enough trained people that know how to use them, even if you get them. But as I just showed you on the official statement by the United States government, they don't put any quantities in there. Now, if there had been another 2 million shells or another 300 artillery pieces or something to that effect, 500 tanks, a bunch, then maybe you could say, okay, it's plausible if they can get people trained up enough. But see, they didn't put the numbers on anything. And you saw that was a large list of things that's on there. Further, when you see that the majority of that money went to the U.S. arsenal, it went to replace stuff that we've already sent, that I told you about, the thousands of vehicles and other kinds of ammunition, millions of rounds. That's to replace our losses. That's not going directly to Ukraine. Only a small portion of that, I think 14 billion, somewhere around there, is actually going directly. That's a pittance of what it is. And then when you see this long list of all of those things, all those categories, then you know just by definition, there can't be very many of any of them. And when you're talking a small sliver of that much money, it becomes irrational to suggest that we're going to stop the Russian offensive. The Ukraine side is going to stop the Russian offensive and then be able to go on the offensive in 2025. Because look, this is coming on top of what's already going on. Gary, if you could put that one up from The Economist here. This is from the 92nd Brigade that they're talking about. They're really, really troubled about what's happening in the center part of the zone right now. The commander here said that they are about a 1 to 10 disadvantage in artillery shells. He says he has some American howitzers, so self-propelled weapons, which by themselves are good. I used to run one. I was a platoon leader for a 155 Paladin or a self-propelled 109 howitzer. He said they have 5 shells per day that they can use. Folks, that's not even one fire mission. You should be firing hundreds of shells per day with a howitzer. He said they got 5 per gun, which means they have nothing. This package, let me emphasize this again, will not change that dynamic. So if they're continuing to lose ground almost by the day, not almost, by the day in the center part of that zone, especially around Avdiivka and the Bakhmut areas, and still other parts of it too, in the Kupiansk area, they've also been losing ground recently. This package won't redress it. So then upon what basis are you saying that this is going to reverse? Upon what fantasy are you going to say that there's going to be an offensive in 2025? It just defies any kind of logic. And let me lay out something for you here. This is what is necessary for anyone who claims to be a supporter of the Ukraine side and wants to have any credibility at all, just to be able to stand before you and say that there's going to be an offensive and that things are going to turn around and that the balance of power is going to overcome. They have to be able to tell you that how the air power situation is going to reverse. Right now, the Russians have an advantage of about 1,000 to 76 in air power in 4th and 5th generation fighters. 1,000 to 76. We're talking about adding 8 to 12 F-16s in the coming days. And as MIT professor Ted Postel told you in one of our episodes a couple of days ago, they're just regular planes. They're not impervious to the Russian anti-aircraft systems that are out there, the S-300s, the S-400s, et cetera. There's just a small number to this massive number. So you've got to tell me how you're going to overcome the disparity in the air power. You've got to tell me the air defense system. Russia has substantially more tactical and operational and even strategic air defense systems in compared to the Ukrainian side. So you've got to somehow tell me how they're going to reverse that. armor, the armored vehicles, the handful that has been offered to Ukraine side is not a fraction of the number of the Russian side. And their industrial capacity is continuing to build that up. Engineering support. Russia has substantially more engineering support where they can build defensive lines and make really good defensive networks of systems and pillboxes and all those kinds of things, which they demonstrated to exceptional use in the Ukraine offensive in 2023. And the Ukraine side clearly does not have them because their defensive positions that they've been building are hasty things that are not that good. And Russia has been shown to be blowing right through some of them. I showed you some video of that about a week or so ago. The electronic warfare system. Russia is, by many reports, knocking down 80% of the drones on the Ukraine side before they ever get to the battlefield because of their electronic warfare capacity. Ukraine side also has some electronic warfare, but it's not as effective as the Russian side. So a lot higher percentage of a lot higher number of the Russian side are getting through. The drones themselves, there's just a lot more of them on the Russian side than there is on the Ukraine side. In the industrial capacity, probably the second biggest factor in the reason why Russia is making these advances is because they have an entire system, because this is an existential fight for Russia. They have almost gone to a complete wartime economy, which means that all of their war-making factories are basically 24/7, 365, multiple shifts. I mean, they never stop, and they have retooled many other factories. They've expanded capacity, which they started doing fairly early in the war. And so now then you're into your third year here, they are cranking things out in large quantities. And that means high-end stuff like missiles, these FAB bombs. Now they're getting bigger. A 1,500 kilogram bomb was dropped the other day, which they say can wipe out entire blocks of a city. Those are starting to come online. Yeah, some of those are right there that Gary's showing you. Those things are starting to come online as well. And there's no answer for it on the Ukraine side. So if you can't outproduce somebody, and everything in the West, and I just showed you how our capacity even into 2026 won't be maybe maybe a third, maybe a half of what Ukraine might need. If they can stay alive that long, you see, you can't keep up with that. And the number one issue, you've got to show me how the Ukraine side can overcome the manpower problem. As I was talking to you a second ago, the issue is not just about how many weapons you can have. As important as that is, you've got to have trained people who know how to use them. And the Russians are recruiting, meaning people are signing up in the tune of 20, 30, and reportedly sometimes some months even 40,000 signing up new recruits. Ukraine side can't even offset their losses because they don't have enough manpower. Millions of them left the country. They're doing it by the day because they see it's a losing fight. So nobody wants to come. Many people pay bribes to get out of it. Other people are literally swimming across rivers to try to get out. I saw the reports that the Ukraine side now has to employ manpower on the NATO side of the border to try to catch jumpers. And then they immediately throw those they catch into the front lines or into training, which then very quickly end up on the front lines. They've tried to change this mobilization law to lower the age so that they get more manpower in, but nobody wants to do this, and they're not getting enough anyway. They needed, I think the number was, their objective was 50,000 per month, but they're not getting a fraction of that. So if you can't even offset your losses, and the Russians are numerically adding, they have a net add to the size of their force every single month. And like this Northern Army that's now attacking in the north here, those folks were training out of contact for months. I don't know if you remember seeing this, but it's been nearly a year that Russia announced that they were forming new armored formations. And now then here's they are finally coming online into play, which means they've been out of contact training. They've had all the lessons that they've learned. They've staffed it probably with the leaders of people with experience so that they add new guys who can be trained on the lower level stuff, but with the experience of the higher level commanders and field officers so that they have a chance to actually be good. So all these guys are fresh, and the guys that they're going against are not. Many of the Ukraine side haven't even been off the line in 2 years. And I can just tell you mentally, you just can't stay sharp that long. It's impossible. I mean, we've seen that through all of our experiences in warfare. The United States has. You just can't do that. So that means the quality is continuing to go down. Ukraine doesn't have the luxury of training its forces out of contact. They still want them to go forward. And it's just not going to work. The math doesn't work. The ratio and the balance of forces doesn't work. These people who are advocating all these things continue to ignore the reality, and they don't answer those questions I just asked there. You have to answer every question I just asked on that list. Show me a path, a logical, rational path to how you're going to undo air power, air defense, armor, engineering support, electronic warfare, drones, industrial capacity, and manpower. All of those have to be addressed by those who want to claim that Ukraine is going to win this war. If you can't do that, then the only moral, rational, logical thing to do is to say, let's seek a negotiated settlement on the best terms that we can get. And they're not going to be very good terms right now, but that's at least possible. It's at least reasonable to think you could get some kind of a negotiated settlement to end the war, to end the dying and the unnecessary killing of the Ukrainian people. That's what we should be doing, but we're not. And in fact, here just from a few months ago, is President Biden laying out what his view of it. This is what he wants to achieve, despite all the things I just told you.
The entire world is watching. What will the United States do? And think if we don't support Ukraine, what's the rest of the world going to do? What's Japan going to do, which is supporting Ukraine now? What's going to happen in terms of the G7? What's going to happen in terms of our NATO allies? What are they going to do? If we walk away now, it'll only embolden other would-be aggressors.
You know what? He asked a lot of rhetorical questions there, and some of those are not rhetorical anymore. And he keeps asking, what are all these people going to think? What are they going to say? What are they going to do? Implying that so we can't lose. Well, if you could win, if there was even a theoretical possibility, maybe that would be something, but it's not. It's not a theoretical possibility. I mean, in human affairs, nothing can ever be 100% or a 0%. Because there's human agency and people make mistakes and whatever. So it's always at least some possibility of something shaken loose. But to predicate the survival of a nation and our credibility and our capacity on the extremely unlikely possibility that Ukraine can ever reverse this is irrational, and it's immoral, because you're rolling the dice with some American dollars, which is bad. But it's with the Ukrainian lives who are paying for it on a daily basis. There is in human affairs, as much as it can be, there is no chance for this to reverse. And every probability that it's going to continue going the way it has, and that Ukraine will eventually be forced to sue for peace on basically terms of surrender. That's what happens if you don't. So to Biden's questions, what are people going to say if Ukraine loses? Those things are becoming more and more realistic. And I can tell you something. If you make a deal right now that says we acknowledge reality, we recognize what's going on here, and we acknowledge that it can't reverse. There's no rational path to do it. So we're going to take what is the rational path, and we're going to seek a negotiated settlement. For sure, Russia would crow about it. People would point fingers at you. They would laugh at you. They would say, "Oh, you're so bad, you're so weak," and stuff. That would all happen, and I don't dispute that at all. As bad as that would be, though, that is a lot better than the alternative, because while they're pointing their fingers at you, we still have all of Western Europe supported and defended. No Western countries have been attacked. No Western soldiers would be dead. They would all still be alive. And this war would not have expanded. And our security would still be just as strong as it was before February 2022. We would still be secure. We would still be able to defend our interests with no problem, because Russia does not have the capacity to go beyond Ukraine. They can't even, you see now we're in the third year of war, and they're still not broken through all these cities. It's been months now that they've been trying to get Chasiv Yar, a city of about 12,000, or it's not even a city, it's a town of about 12,000. They've opened up this new front, but you see all of these things are moving very slow and methodically. Unless the Ukraine army breaks and then the Russians can literally start just driving through the countryside, which is possible, it's going to take them a long time to do things. The idea that they could go into any Western country where there are cities and entire armies that haven't been used at all, and they're all fresh, it would be suicide for Russia to attempt that. And they won't, because he also knows, and he's said this openly many times, he understands that they're conventionally weaker than all of NATO combined, a lot weaker. So if there is a clash between NATO, the NATO alliance, and Russia, it's going to be nuclear weapons. They're testing right now tactical nuclear weapon exercises to show that they are serious, that if it gets to that kind of escalation, they'll go there. Of course, it's absurd for us to even play with that. But if we keep going down the path, and if we don't do what I just suggested and take the near-term embarrassing hit, then I assure you, it will be far more than just pointing fingers if Russia eventually wins a conventional victory over Ukraine and they have a tactical success and victory. NATO will be looking totally weak and lose credibility among friends and adversaries. And people will be saying, man, everything they did, everything they attempted was beaten by Russia. After you put all these sanctions on them and had these 50 nations that met every month to try to help Ukraine's side, all of it failed. All the West intelligence, all the Western training, all the Ukrainian side, everything they had, all of these weapons, and they still didn't stop Russia. Vladimir Putin's stock will be through the roof globally. And he's already on the ascension already. But if that happens, and everything we did and everything we said, all those nonsensical clips I've just showed you about people saying that they're going to win and they're going to turn things around, all of it will be exposed as being absurd. You want to worry about our credibility, that's where you should worry about it. And that is why I'm so emphatic about making videos like this, to tell people the truth, to show you this is what's at stake. And folks, nearly everything I've been talking about since this war began is playing out. Some of it's slower than what I talked about, but the numbers just are what they are. Military history is what it is, and the fundamentals that go into building combat power at the national level are, if not sacrosanct, they're very, very in industrial capacity. It shows it. It's just hard to argue with the facts, although many are doing it, but it's still hard to. And at some point, you can spin things all you want, but there does come a point to where reality imposes itself on you, and all of this nonsense could be exposed in a day. And we'll see how that works out. I just still hope and I pray that somehow that some leader is going to be willing to do the right thing and say, let's shut this thing down before we make a foolish decision and say, oops, we're starting to lose. We better put Western troops in. And you know, there's many people talking about that already. They've been talking about it for long. It's not just the French. There are others that are talking about sending in Western troops. And folks, do not go down that path. There's nothing to gain and a great deal to lose for the West. We need a little bit of humility. We need a lot, but let's start with a little bit of humility and just make rational decisions that can benefit the people in Ukraine who are still alive and all of the Western security. That's what's at stake here. Let's see how it plays out. I wanted to give you that update. This is just the first day of this in the northern part. You can count on us to continue bringing you detailed updates like this to tell you what's really going on, and we will continue to go through this. We have our weekly Intel update brief later this afternoon, 2 o'clock, I believe. So you'll want to tune in there, see the things that you might have missed this week, and of course, this will be a part of that. But we will see you at 2 o'clock on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.